Hello, and welcome to Capes, Cowls, and Crusaders for our Penguin series review. I'm Kat, joined by Ernesto,
Buenas noches.
Iceberg in the Caribbean, nice. And we're here to review the third episode of The Penguin.
Yes, somehow this iceberg is able to survive these treacherous waters.
Oh, and see, we got in the chat. Oh, hello, Daniel's Hot Topics. Howdy, Lemon Pie, nice to see you. So,
Apologies for the delay, but it is a fashionable delay.
Oh, yes. Always fashionable delay when you're jumping off a Scotty stream.
Yep.
As I just did.
I did tell him to update the software, but sure enough, never does.
So, the third episode of The Penguin. I guess I'll start. It begins with Victor at his family's apartment, and his mom's like sitting on the couch, the TV's on, his sister's there, his dad's like preparing dinner or whatever in the kitchen, and Victor wants to introduce his father to his new friends, but his dad's like, no, because your friend's cousin pushes drugs, and I don't like that. And Victor says, oh, come on, that's his cousin, doesn't matter, I still want you to meet him. And his dad's like upset about it. And not wanting to get into a fight about it, Victor changes the subject to say that, Dad, I think you should be asking for more money at work. You deserve more. And then his sister chimes in and agrees. And his dad kind of shouts him down, saying, well, considering where we came from, we have more than we need. And the mom tries to back him out of this confrontation. But Victor's like, well, fine, I'm going to go like hang out with my friends. He's like, and his father's like, oh, fine, why don't you go do that? He's like, sure. So then he takes off. And he goes to the rooftop of a building down the street. And he's there with his friend Graciela, who we finally meet. She's the one who's been texting him off and on throughout the last episode. And they're going to watch some type of fireworks show, I guess, for the election. Because their cell phone said it was November 5th. It was like, oh, geez. And they're sitting there and they're talking. And you see one of the dopes who ends up helping him steal Penguin's rims later on. And then all of a sudden, the explosions go off at the seawall. And the flood just barrels down the street like hurricane force speeds, apparently. And he quickly gets on his cell phone to call his mom, but he's too late.
Yeah, it was a biblical flood happening right before his eyes. And it's one of those, it's a flashback, obviously. It's a flashback. It connects the series to the movies, and it mainly connects Victor to the movie. Basically, it's like that glue that pretty much says, okay, who is Victor? Where does he come from? Why is he where he is the moment he meets Oswald Cobb? And in this one, it's any other show, if there was more than one character in this position that Victor is in, we would get a flashback for every single one character, and it culminates with the explosion of the sea walls and then coming back to the present. But since Victor is really the only one who is kind of like the audience in this situation, where he's the one that really is the product, or the result, I should say, of the flood that was the climax, for lack of a better term, but that's pretty much what it is, the climax of the Batman. It's one of those, it's very heartbreaking. And the title of this show is very apropos, because in such a short time, you get to know who Victor is, you get to know who his family is, you get to know that he comes from humble beginnings, you get to know that his family was rich, not in money, not in stature, but in love that they have for Victor and he for them. It shows everything he loses, and it shows that Gotham, for all the times we've seen Gotham in comics and video games, Gotham has evolved to really reflect, as a grounded story, it really reflects the world outside your window. And it's kind of like the prototypical outside your window, but in this case it's Gotham. And yeah, that moment where the bombs go off and the the water comes in and it's barreling down within seconds, not even 30 seconds. Like it is coming down, it is destroying bridges, cars are being flung to the sides, and he sees where it's going. And the moment it like catches up to him, I'm like, shit, shit, shit. And he's, because he sees where it's going, he's trying to call his mom, and you can see just a silhouette of the apartment where they are. And you can see people moving, but too late. And it's like he just wanted to jump in there and give him a hug. God damn it.
Yeah, and all the gravel on top of the rooftop starts vibrating because of the intensity of that flood, and you see just how high the water level was because they lived on an upper floor apartment, and it just blasts the whole building.
Yeah, and you can probably infer that they were probably trying to run to the roof, but the water was coming in so fast that by the time it collided, if you haven't made it to the roof by then, that's it.
Yeah.
And their window was open, so all that pressure went in there. Like, damn.
Yeah, so that was just bad.
It was rough. As far as origin stories goes in this universe, it was rough.
Yeah, and then you just have that hard cut to, the penguin. And it's like, oh geez. And he kind of snaps out of it again, and he's in Penguin's apartment, and Gabrielle is texting him, and he kind of hides the phone, and Oz figures he's gonna pay him some money for working for him. And he gives him $1,000. And he's like, wow, $1,000? And Penguin's like, yeah, well, I don't know, why not? I like you. You're a good assistant, Vic. You're learning, but you're getting better. And I like that you kind of assert yourself and know what you want. He's like, well, then can I have $2,000? And he's like, man, no, but I respect you for asking, and that kind of thing. He then gets a phone call, and he's like, oh, this must be Maroney. So he goes into his back room and closes the vault door. Well, there's a knock on the door, and he knows it's Sophia. And Victor's like, I can't answer the door. It's Sophia. And he's like, yeah, just distract her. It'll be fine. He's like, but she's the hangman. He's like, don't believe everything you read, kid, or everything you see on TV, which is the first of such hints about that. So, which I guess I'll answer later on. But he goes to answer the door, and she walks in, and Sophia's not really impressed. And she looks around and sees how Oz has that fake fireplace with the TV. She's like, kind of tacky. I like it. And she's standing there, and she's asking, well, where did Oz find you? And he chokes and said, oh, well, I was a mechanic, and I worked on one of his cars, and we were repairing it. And he's just like not being convincing at all. So she pulls out a cigarette, and he brings her a lighter, but he can't figure out how to light it. And she's like, you're a mechanic and you can't operate a lighter? He's like, well, I think it's broken, actually. And then she just lights it in a second. And she's like, okay, she's not going to say anything else or voice any of your other suspicions.
Sometimes silence is key, people.
Yes. So Penguin comes out, and they're figuring, okay, it's time for us to go. And she's like, no, it's just you and I. The kid stays behind. And so he's like, okay, so they're leaving. And he tells the kid, don't do anything funny. I'll know about it, or I'll sense it, or something like that. So he closes the door, and they leave. Victor then decides, since he's got some time, he calls his friend Gabriella and invites her over to Penguin's, which I was like, oh, geez, don't do that, kid. But he does it anyway, and she shows up, and she basically tells him that, look, I don't want to live in FEMA camps anymore, and we've lost everything, so I'm moving to California. I'm going to buy a bus ticket tomorrow. Why don't you come with me? And he's like, well, I can't because I'm working for this guy. He's like, your boss won't let you go? And he's like, well, he's kind of, mobster, kind of implies that. And I've seen some things I wasn't supposed to see. And she's like, this all sounds like all the more reason to run away to California.
Yeah.
But he's not biting. And so she's like, well, I'm going to be at the bus stop tomorrow. And he's like, okay. So he gives her some of the money and tells her to buy him a ticket. And he's like, yeah, I'll see you there tomorrow. But you could tell he's having his doubts because, like, the beginning of the episode teased, like, he told his dad, you should want more out of life. And, Penguin gave him $1,000 right there for just, working for him for a week. So that's obviously weighing on his mind. So he sends Gabrielle away.
Yeah, but a few things. One, I think you had it right the first time. It's Graciela, but you've been saying Gabriella.
Oh, Graciela. Yeah,
Graciela. I I don't know. I think at one point there's one of those situations where you kind of blink and you miss. I didn't know who he was texting because for whatever reason, my brain just had this like I like to call this a Mandela effect meets um, dyslexia because I thought that he texted his sister that after the whole flood, his sister survived the whole thing, and then he never saw the girl ever again. So I thought his sister was going to be at the apartment. So when it opened and it was Graciela, I'm like, oh God, now my heart hurts even more because I had my hopes up that it was his sister, but it's actually his girlfriend. And yeah, she pretty much just gave him an out. That's like, look, I'm leaving. I want to start fresh. You should come with me. And that's it kind of just turned from the B story to the A story for Victor. And now the B story is whatever Oz and Sophia are doing.
Yeah. And hello to other people in the chat. Lemon Pie saying hi to you. He also says Scotty fell down the cinema gulp never to return. Yes, he did.
Yeah, we took the straws away.
And Eugene says you guys have been busy and creepy this season. Yes, we have. And DJ Play Nice.
Yeah, busy for sure. Creepy. Well, that's my internet search engine.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting. Thank you. So she leaves. He stays behind at the apartment, and then we go to see where Sophia is taking Oz to, and she reveals that she's taking him to this, revolutionary new drug operation that Alberto spoke of. He's like, I didn't know Alberto involved you in this. And she's like, yeah, well, he don't tell you everything, Oz. And so they get to this warehouse, and they get out of the car, they go inside, and they go through these and she introduces him to a chemist, and he's like, here's the chemical, and she shows him, and it's like in a little jar with the red crystals, and he's not really sure. Penguin isn't really sure what this means. The guy talks some scientific mumbo jumbo about how the stuff works, and then he leads him into the back room to show him where it's sourced from, and you have hanging from the ceiling in these suspended cylinders of dirt all these mushrooms growing with these red spores on them. And Penguin's like, Sophia, I don't know, you've been gone for quite a while, but you can go to any dorm room in Gotham and get mushrooms. It's not really a big deal. And she's like, well, you need to look closer, Oz, because we're not after the mushrooms. We're after this red, like, bleeding spores that are inside the mushroom. And she explains that at Arkham Asylum, the doctors would give this to the patients to, make their problems go away, to just, medicate them and put them in a back room or whatever. And that she calls it, they're going to call it bliss. Which I believe, Ernesto, is a comic book reference.
It is. Sorry, you caught me unprepared. But continue and I'll jump back. Oh, no, wait, hang on. I found it. Sorry. Okay. So, yes, Bliss is a comic book reference to in the DC universe, but it's also not just a drug, but it's also the name of a character, several characters, in fact. One of the more prominent characters is from the Wildstorm universe, Nicole Callahan. And you've had other characters such as the Drug, which is from New Earth, and Mr. Bliss. And then if you want to go even further down the rabbit hole of how far the DC imprint goes, it's also a reference to the Fables comic book series. But yes, there is a Drug when there was the reset of New Earth. And it's basically a two-way psychotic connector between the brain and citywide swath. A drug to expand his mental capacity to godlike degrees. And if you ever need that to be explained in layman's terms, just imagine a superhuman drug. But we're taming it for the Penguin, which, considering how much drug paraphernalia is outside in the real world, it's really not that out of the realm of possibility to have a super shroom in this series.
Yes, and an interesting drug they would choose to give to Arkham patients. Yeah. You wouldn't think you'd want to make them like superhuman or whatever. But she describes it as being like the next best high that everybody's just going to love. And they must have it connected to Arkham because they were smuggling this stuff in the big bags that said Arkham State Hospital on it. So they got to connect there somewhere. See, the Dead Man chimes in. He says, I initially thought these mushrooms were somehow connected to the fear gas that Scarecrow uses. I initially was thinking that too, which was talking about, oh, the psychotropic this and that. And I'm like, oh, maybe somebody else mentioned something about poison ivy in a comic book line that's something to do with that type of drug. Uh, maybe as a backdoor setup to whatever they might be doing in the sequel. I'm not sure. We'll have to find
Yeah.
out.
Although I wouldn't put too much stock into Pamela because she would actually have sentient mushrooms than dead ones.
That's true. So, yeah.
And the jury is still out on whether we get a Scarecrow connection, because just because he does hallucination doesn't mean he can't extend it to mushrooms. She did say it's a drug medication from Arkham, and there is still a connection to Arkham with Scarecrow. I'm just saying.
Yep, and as Matt Reeves said, he hinted that they want to push the next one to the edge of the fantastical.
Exactly.
Well, because the first movie was pretty grounded, so it could be. We'll see.
Also, imagine that if you're someone like Scarecrow and you're constantly working on and perfecting your hallucinogen drugs, you can call this one Bliss. The next one will be called Scarecrow.
Yes. And so, because Sophia has basically been shut out of the family business by Luca, Penguin decides he has a plan to get this drug out on the street for them. And he says, we'll go to Chinatown to deal with it, to meet with this guy, Link, who's an underboss to Zhang. So they drive down to Chinatown the next day, and Victor parks the car in a loading zone, not realizing it, while Penguin brings a big crate of his best liquor inside with Sophia. And they get frisked when they're inside, when they get to the door. And then Sophia doesn't even let him frisk her. She's like, nope, it's in the back pocket or whatever. So he takes the gun, and they walk in. They're at the nightclub, and the underboss is not impressed by Penguin, alluding to some past debt he owes. And he's like, you're not getting in a meeting with my boss, Penguin. Forget it. And he even alludes, much like the Maronis, that they know Penguin is kind of a slippery guy and not somebody they should trust. But he's like, come on, man, I brought you a crate of my best alcohol stuff to make up for the past mistakes. And this drug's going to be great. It's going to change everything. And he's like, who's supporting you? And Link's like, well, who's supporting you on this? And he's like, Johnny Vitti. He's backing us up. And he's like, Johnny Vitti's supporting you. He's like, yeah. Well, and Link's like, well, I want Johnny Vitti to call Zhang personally to confirm this, because Link is obviously very suspicious. And even Sophia's encouragements are not enough to convince Link that they're serious. And Penguin just immediately assures Link, oh, okay, no problem. I'll get Johnny on the phone with you. He'll prove it tonight. And Sophia's like smiling initially, going along with it. But once Link leaves to, I guess, check with Zhang if he'd be open to this, she kind of looks at Penguin. She's like, what are you playing at? Like, what are you doing? She has no idea how they would get Johnny Vitti to agree to such a thing, especially after he threatened her in last week's episode. And Penguin just kind of laughs at her, and he's like, don't worry, I've got it handled.
Yeah. Again, he's always got a plan for the plan for the plan.
Yes.
And I like that. And I like that. Yeah, he doesn't trust him but at the same time, he doesn't take him seriously. Because again, Penguin has always been the underling, and everybody is still treating him like the underling. And depending on how this show ends, I can only imagine everybody who kept giving him shit and grief are going to be like, oh, God, I'm going to have to do 1,000 apologies, don't I?
I have other theories as to how the series is going to end. We'll get to that later.
So far, they're dispelling a lot of the ones we had initially, so we're going places.
Oh, yeah. So, meanwhile, while they're inside having the meeting with Link, this cop car shows up and turns on his lights, and Victor's nervous because the duffel bag with all the drugs is sitting in the back seat, partially open. And the cop taps on the window. He's like, get out of the car, son. So he gets out, and he's like, okay, spread him. And he puts him on the hood of the car and frisks him. And he's like, you're parked in a loading zone, son. He's like, oh, it's my boss's car. He finds the money that he has on him, whatever's remaining of the $1,000. Like, this is a lot of money to be carried on you, kid. Someone as young as you. And he's like, and Victor just improvises. He's like, what money, sir? And the cop's like, okay. So the cop slips it in his pocket. And he's like, just make sure you're gone with your boss out of the loading zone the next time I come around. He's like, okay. So then the cop leaves. Later after the meeting, Penguin and Victor go to lunch at this fancy restaurant, and Victor tells him of the encounter, and Penguin laughs and likes that Vic was smart enough to get himself out of it. And he's like, yeah, well, that's the business sometimes.
It's one of those moments where I had to like stop and think, wait a minute. as corrupt as this officer is, because clearly this officer is corrupt.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the cop wouldn't recognize who the car belongs to.
Right. I was also surprised that Vic didn't tell him who his boss was. That could have had some pull.
Yeah, he could have either, I mean, whatever move they went with, it's basically showing that Victor can think on his feet. He just needs the motivation for it.
Yeah.
But I was expecting Victor to be like, you don't want to do that. Why not? Well, do you not know who this car belongs to? Like, it would be cliche, but it would be like the first thing out of your mouth if you were in his position. Like, you really don't know who this car belongs to, do you? And granted, after the events of the Batman, yeah, half of the force is corrupt, but the other half is good and not corruptible. So we haven't really cleaned house yet. So it's one of those things where I'm just like, if this cop was at some point on the payroll for the Falcone family, then he would be like, oh shit, I'm sorry.
Yeah, especially since he's willing to take the money. It's a safe bet he was on the payroll.
Yeah.
So they're at the restaurant, and Penguin wants to learn more about Victor and his family. So he tells him about his father as a mechanic and how they're a proud family. They could never, ever in their wildest dreams afforded to be at a restaurant like this and all that kind of thing. And Penguin's like, yeah, it's the American dream. Coming here, being your own man, having your own job, all that kind of thing. And he's talking about how impressed he is by his father. And Victor's talking about his family in the past tense, but Penguin doesn't clarify or ask for clarification on that. So he just picks up on it, and he says a toast to your father, Juan, or whatever. So they have a toast about it. And then the waiter comes to the table, and Penguin orders his dish, and Victor starts stuttering a bit when he's trying to order his, and the waiter tries to fill it in for him, and Penguin snaps at the waiter, saying, hey, don't do that, let the man speak. And so he's like, apologies, sir. So the kid says what he wants, and then the waiter leaves to get it, and Penguin's like, or the kid's like, well, you didn't have to do that, Oz. And he's like, you should be doing it for yourself. You should be standing up for yourself. Plus, we could cheat the guy out on the tip now.
Yeah, because this comes back later in the finale of this episode, but under different circumstances, less noble circumstances. Like, yeah, Penguin makes a point here, but then at the end of this episode, he kind of walks over his own advice.
Yeah. So that was funny. So they're talking about that. And then he looks and he sees Luca's wife sitting at this other table. And he's like, okay, showtime, kid. So he gets up and starts walking past her. And he's like, hey, okay, time's up. And so Penguin and Sophia go up to one of the hallways up to the hotel room. And they have the key and they buzz themselves in. And they find, Johnny Vitti and Tina, Luca's wife, having sex in the bed. And then Johnny's like, oh, God, here's this again. And Sophia reminds her to get dressed while she's on her way out. And they're like, what? And Vitti's like, what the hell do you want? You can't tell anybody about this. And Penguin just kind of scoffs at him. Like, what, you think you have any bargaining power right now? It's like, you threatened to kill Sophia. You treat me like a dick. And now you've been doing this. And you think you have the right to talk down to me?
But he does have cannon-sized balls throughout this scene, because it's like, you've been caught red-handed doing the very big no-no. They quite literally, in every sense of the word, have you by the balls. But I was about to ask Penguin to remove the sheets, because I want to see how big these cojones are, because throughout they have him dead to rights, and he still has the nerve to talk smack. I'm like, the fuck is wrong with this guy? Does he not realize what's going on?
Yeah, and so Penguin's like, enough of this shit. You're gonna call Zhang Shi for us, and you're gonna tell him that you back us entirely on this new operation we're pulling, the one you weren't interested in. He's like hell, I'm not gonna do it. And then he just insults him even further, saying that you're just a sap. You were just the club owner. Nobody takes you seriously. You're just really talking a hell of a lot of smack. At which point Penguin finally snaps and just jumps on the bed and shoves the cell phone into Johnny Vitti's mouth, and he's forcing him to bite down on it so hard that you hear the cover shatter. Yeah. And you think he's going to break his teeth on it or something, to when he finally backs off and pulls the phone out of his mouth, and then he tosses it back down. He's like, you better make that damn call.
Yep, there's that short temper again.
Yeah. But in a sense, Vidi earned that little beatdown. So
No. It was deserved from on both sides. It was deserved, but I was hoping that Penguin would be able to restrain himself long enough because motherfucker, you need this guy alive. You can't do another Alberto scenario. You need if you want this to work. And Sophia's just standing by, just like, okay, let's see how this goes.
oh hey, Matt G, welcome to the show. Yeah, so she's just standing by, seeing how it goes, and Vidi, realizing he's cornered, finally decides to make the call for them. And so they're like, okay, that's, gone as well as can be expected. Of course, Sophia doesn't know that Penguin has given the photos of the affair to the Maronis yet, and he doesn't know if that's going to affect his plans or not. And so
it can still affect them, but he's got to move quick before it happens. It's like there's a ticking time bomb here, but he's playing it pretty fast and loose and hoping the chips fall where they need to.
Yeah.
Because again, when he was trying to convince the triad to get the meeting with the head of the triad, it's just like, all right, I'm just going to start spouting shit and hopefully it can get me somewhere. So I'm just like, oh, Oz, you better hope this works out.
Yeah. So then, having gotten the backing from Johnny Viti, the three of them return to the club, and they meet with Zhang. And he's listening to her, and Sophia's making the deal, and she's like, look, after what that Riddler did, flooded our streets, assassinated our mayor, people are looking for an escape right now, a new type of escape. The city needs this. It wants this. And he's like, down below there on the club floor right now, we got our bagman down there handing out samples, and they're loving it. And he sees that they're all buying the drug off of him. And Zhang's like, well, I'm just concerned because you're, a bit of a liability from your years in Arkham. She's like, that disturbs you? And he's like, well, it kind of. And then she's like, well, don't believe everything you read. She kind of hints at that again. But he's still kind of unsure about it. And he's like, well, I'm going to think it over. So then she goes to, meet with Oz briefly, and they're talking, and she basically puts him in his place, reminding him that, look, you were just my driver. Just because you've been pulling a few points here doesn't change the fact that Zhang was here to meet me, not you. And it's like, ooh, that's a burn, given that he was the one who made this all happen,
Yeah, but she's also trying to remind him what her last name is.
Yeah, Falcone.
Yeah.
And so she leaves, being a bit uneasy with Zhang, she leaves Penguin to make the final arrangements for the deal. Meanwhile, on the dance floor, Victor's handing out the samples, and the light show triggers a panic attack as he's remembering the explosions of the seawall, and it causes him to drop the bag, and a bunch of the drug spills everywhere. And this other girl helps him collect it and pick it up rather than stealing it, which I thought was nice. And he's like, come on, keep handing it out. So he does. He's kind of disturbed by it, and he goes to take a break in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And Oz comes to join him there, and he's ecstatic. He's like, kid, we made the deal. We did it. And he's like, oh, good, Oz. And he's kind of uneasy, and Penguin's not sure why. And then Victor's cell phone starts buzzing. And he's like, what's that? And Penguin just gets really aggressive. It's like, oh, let me see it. And he's like, okay. And he looks and scrolls through the messages and sees that it's Graciela writing from the bus stop. And he's like, you thinking of running out on me? And he's like, oh, well, and he kind of gets really timid and admits that he didn't really think he was allowed to leave because Penguin's a mobster. And Penguin takes real offense to that because he thinks he's been helping this kid. And he's like, hey, I threw you a bone when nobody gave a shit about you. I gave you more money than you've probably ever made in your life. I'm offering you a way into the high life with this plan of ours and where it's going. And all you feel is this. And he pulls out a gun and puts it to Victor's head. And he's like, no, man, I actually liked you. But he's like, fine, you want to get the hell out of here? Fine, then go. He's just really pissed off about it. And Victor's just kind of fed up. And so he just storms off.
Yeah, this scene showed just how broken these characters are.
Yeah.
On the one hand, Victor, he's broken because he is a compass without a north pointing anywhere. He's pointing everywhere except north, and it doesn't have the proper magnetic composition for him to go north. He's pretty much rudderless here. And then he finds someone against his will at this point with Oz, and despite everything that he's had to do for him, he kind of found a companion in a way, someone who kind of, in a twisted way, he kind of saved Victor by
Yeah.
giving him new purpose, because he had no purpose after his family died. And considering how long between the events of the movie and this show it took for everything to happen, it's the wound is still fresh. Now, the panic attack situation, I think that came out of nowhere, because by that logic, it should have happened earlier, but fine, we'll let it slide for the narrative purpose. But then for Oz, this guy he's alone. He is alone in so many words. He doesn't have any friends, and the people who he calls friends are just associates at this point, and associates that can die any minute now because they're expendable. And he sees a kid that he kind of sees himself in. He's trying to mold him to kind of make him have everything he didn't, and then he kind of sees like he's betraying himself just by reading those messages, and it's just like, fine, oh, that's what you think I am. You think I'm this big fucking monster. And I'm just like, yeah, you are. What have you done so far to make him think you're not, to be perfectly frank? I mean, yeah, you gave him money, you're giving him a home, you're giving him protection, you're giving him purpose, but even if you're not pointing a gun at him, you did point a gun at him at the beginning. And to him, it feels like if he steps out of line, or if he does something, that you're going to pull the gun again. So of course he's afraid.
Yeah, and then I admit also I was surprised that, I mean, I thought I was kind of on the fence as whether Victor's family were wiped out in the floods. He mentioned something like that in the first episode when Penguin takes him down to the riverbank where he was going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I was skeptical was because it seemed almost like Victor has been too good, like mentally and emotionally stable, for somebody who's lost, his parents and his sister and everything just like a week earlier.
Yeah.
So that was, I'm like, oh, okay, so he did lose everybody. That's kind of, a big turnaround.
Yeah, and part of me felt that maybe as he was, for whatever reason, maybe I missed it at some point, because there were some moments where I'm looking elsewhere at some point watching this episode. While he's handing out the bliss drug, I thought that maybe it got in his skin pore, and that's where the hallucination on his end started, but it was having the negative reaction. Because again, in the comics, the bliss drug can work in more than one way. It's not going to be the feel-good drug. It can also be the feel terrible drug if you're not careful.
Yeah, like Scarecrow says, I told you my compound would take you places. I never said they'd be places you wanted to go.
Indeed.
So
I still don't know if this has anything to do with Scarecrow, but the DNA is there for it to be the possibility.
Yes.
Also, I like that he's wearing white. Everybody is sucking on this red drug, and he is wearing porcelain white.
So Victor storms out of the club angrily, and he's about to walk down the street. Then he realizes he has the keys to Penguin's car, so then he just steals the car and takes off for the bus stop.
Yeah.
Penguin, meanwhile, this is an excellent smash cut too, and Victor drives off, and it just cuts to Penguin of him, or match cut of him sitting at the bar, just still in shock. Like like to your point, he's like, yeah, but Penguin is a monster. He doesn't realize it though, because he's, it's kind of how sociopaths are.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there, just almost dejected that how could Victor leave me after everything I've done for him, type thing, and being a bit angry about it. We then see that Victor shows up at the bus stop, or at the bus terminal, and he sees Graciela waiting in line to get on the bus, and she looks a bit anxious, waiting for him to get there. And he's thinking about it. And what I guarantee is the most fateful decision of his character in the season, he doesn't get on the bus. It drives away without him, and then he takes off in the car.
And I just groan like no tomorrow when that happened. I'm like, Victor, why? You had it out. You had a fucking out.
Because he wants that power.
He wants it, yeah. And which is, again, I don't know how the next 5 episodes of this show is going to go, but that one decision can really come back to haunt him. I swear to God.
And plus, Graciela never mentioned anything about like whereabouts in California where they're going. Like, did she have friends there, or were they just gonna, we'll just go to California and everything's gonna be great? It's like,
no, well, yeah, but they're young and stupid, and they want a better life. It makes sense. They're
Okay, I
both.
guess that's true.
I looked their characters up, and they're both 19, going on 20. So it kind of fits the personality of young adults. They have no idea what to do, but they know they want to do it anywhere away from Gotham.
That's true. And she also says that she lost her whole family as well in the flood.
Yeah, she has nothing to do. She'd rather start somewhere fresh. Why would you want to? It's a lot of people. Like, again, I've been through hurricanes when I was a kid, twice. In fact, the first time I remember, my street got flooded and water did go inside our house. Not to the point where nothing could be salvaged. We still had the house. Don't forget about. But I remember as a kid. I still remember to this day how scary it was just to see the water coming through the door.
Mm.
This was like, I want to say, mid to late 90s. I think it was Hurricane George at the time. And I had never in my life seen cars submerged in water. I've never seen SUVs with water going up to the engine. At one point, my mom had to get out of the car because the water levels went so high that we were stuck. We couldn't go anywhere, but we could still walk. And imagine you're a kid and your dad has to pull you out of the window because he can't open the door and risk you getting, pelted by water while you're strapped to a car seat at the time. And my mom has to put me on her shoulders and walk me back to the house because it would be safer to stay than leave. And my dad never came back, and I was afraid that my dad was never going to come back. So I relate to the fact that you kind of want to escape that reality and try something new. Granted, going to California might be the better option. I'm glad she said California, because if she would have said Florida, I would have been like, the fuck? I mean, my heart goes out to the people in Florida right now, but I'm just saying these last few years with Florida, I'm glad they said anywhere but Florida. That would have been a big ironic twist of fate.
Yeah. Funny, Eugene Bird, that you mentioned that. This must be the closest to Fargo you've gotten in a while. Yeah, because in season 2 of Fargo, Peggy just wants to move out to California because everything's going to be better in our lives if we move to California.
Yeah, those fault lines are still stable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, this was very heartbreaking because you see the decisions being made and you're just like, all right, well, I don't like it, but I'm rooting for you, Vic. I swear to God, I'm rooting for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The dead man says, the timing of this episode to real life is crazy. I know, the big flooding in Asheville last week. I have a friend in Asheville. Fortunately, he's doing all right. But yeah, it is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's a coincidence, really. It's like you don't plan for this, shit happens, and when you least expect it, art imitates life, and sometimes it does it live.
Yes. So back at the club, Penguin goes outside where Sophia is, and they get to talking, and she once again kind of insults him, like trying to put him in his place. He's like, look, I thought we could have this partnership here. Look at this deal I worked, all that kind of thing. And she kind of steps on it again and saying, no, I'm in charge, kind of thing. And then she gets emphatic with him about how you sold me out, and I'm not the hangman. And I thought, okay, does she mean that she's literally not the hangman, or that's not the hangman as the way the media may have portrayed it? It'll be interesting to see what that means. Because that's her identity in the comics. She is the hangman. And so if they try and say, oh, she was framed and set up by all the guys in the family, it's like, I don't know. It would make it a little less interesting, because she does seem to genuinely be, because it would mean her delusion is more the result of just being locked up in Arkham for 10 years and being held on vengeance against the family.
That's true. That also could be a possibility, because anybody who's read a comic book, when has Arkham ever helped anyone?
Right. And even Zhang mentioned that, your father, and she's like, yeah, I know you don't like my dad because he pushed out a lot of your business. And he's like, I celebrated with a bottle of champagne when he died. She's like, and I danced on his grave the first chance I got. So we know she really doesn't like the rest of the family. So apparently your dad sold her out too. But before this,
And I like this exchange between them, because Oz is moving against the family and Sophia wants to be head of the family. And whether they're going back and forth or whether she can trust him or not, this is one of those moments where it's just like, you know what? Okay, ceasefire. Let's have a chat. And this is the closest they're ever going to get to being on the same page, on the same wavelength, and not at each other's throat.
Yeah. And so their conversation is suddenly interrupted by this big SUV, which just swings up in front of them. And Nadia Maroney gets out. She just starts pitch talking Penguin immediately. She's like, "You idiot! You didn't think we were watching you trying to double time us or whatever." And the look on Sophia's face when she looks at Oz and realizes, like, oh, you could see it, that she suspects, oh, maybe I was right. And they make a point of not revealing what Nadia says, because it very quickly cuts back to Victor, who's about to round the corner at the intersection, and he sees Sophia and Oz on their knees with Maroney's gunman pointing at him and Nadia talking down to them. And again, we can't hear what she's saying. And so Victor just makes another big, bold decision. He just guns it on the accelerator and rams into the gunman, pinning him to the back of the SUV. And Penguin immediately jumps into the car and he's like, go, 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 go. And he's like, what about Sophia? Leave her, leave her. And then they take off.
Yeah.
Away, and Penguin's just thrilled and excited. And Victor's just like, oh, Jesus. You know.
What the fuck did I dig myself into?
I know.
Yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if episode 4 starts with that scene when they're on their knees from their perspective and figure out what Nadia's saying, because even if she doesn't say a damn thing in what we didn't hear, the fact that she openly out loud accused him of double crossing right in front of Sophia means that whatever doubts she had are now amplified, and now she's like, oh, so you're doing something, aren't you?
Yes. The Dead Man says, thanks for clearing that up because I couldn't understand the dialogue with Nadia. Yeah, she just immediately jumps out. She's like, yeah, you're double crossing us. And of course they didn't want to show us what the whole conversation was, because my assumption as to why Penguin says leave her behind is because Nadia just told everything. She's like, yeah, he gave us the ring back and he helped us ambush the drops operation. That was all his deal, Yeah. So he's like, oh, we're done with this and we're taking off. And so it'll be interesting to see.
It makes me wonder just how episode 4 is going to start, because they're clearly proven that they're trying to break away from convention.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the fuck episode 4 is going to start. I have no idea where this is going to go now. I don't know where this is going to go.
They do. I don't know if you're watching it, but they're playing the next time on Penguin at the end of each.
Oh, I never watched the previews. I always go in cold.
Okay, yeah, I won't tell you then. But so that'll be interesting. I think it'll be it'd be crazy to see. I would expect the show's going to get a lot more intense and fast paced at this point.
Yeah, but look at how happy Oz was when Vic came back. He was so happy. I'm like, yeah, kid, yeah. I'm so happy.
Yeah, I knew you'd come back.
I was like, oh my God, you broken bastard. God damn you. It's like one of those things where it's just like, oh, you're a son of a bitch. I don't like you. And then in this scene, it's like, okay, I guess I kind of like you. Even though I know you're a monster.
Yeah.
It was a great episode, all things considered. Again, just this one show in that flashback scene did more character development than most shows have this year. God damn it. That's great writing.
I feel like there's certain studios that I just want all their writers to sit down and watch the first 3 episodes and say, see, this is how good the writing should be.
Yeah. And you're supposed to focus on your characters doing character things and not worry about how much it costs to make the background look good.
Yeah.
Because you can worry about the background later. You need to worry about what's going to make the background look good, which is your actors, your characters.
Yes.
And the pacing and everything. But no, we got to get saddled with woe is me every 5 minutes. even in this series, woe is me is far better than woe is me somewhere else.
Dead Man says, you mean like the Acolyte? Yes, it's exactly what I was referring to.
That is exactly what I am saying in no uncertain terms. God damn it. Yes, Dead Man, you're on it.
But even the backgrounds didn't look that great in that show. But
I know.
I want to go down to Lucasfilm because their headquarters is like 80 miles from me, Skywalker Ranch or whatever. Go to the Stag Theater, have everybody sit down in there on their team and have them watch this show. And I say, see what this is and how good this is. This is what you need to be doing. This is how you have great writing. But yeah, I think that decision by Victor is going to be fateful because my big prediction is that the Penguin, one way or another, will be the death of Victor by the end of the show. Because so far it's just Penguin going against gangsters, and like the Joker says, oh, if a couple gangbangers get shot, nobody panics. So you need to see Penguin do something like evil. So I kind of expect that he'll turn on Victor if it suits him at some point.
Yeah. Or my theory, he puts him in charge of his mom and shit goes down and Victor doesn't deliver. And then Oz is going to, that scene in the bathroom is going to be a cakewalk compared to what could happen if something were to happen to his mom under Victor's watch. Oof.
Jeez.
Again, theory. And considering the show is so far throwing a lot of our theories out the trash and doing their own thing, I don't see Victor surviving this. And if he does, he's still not going to survive this.
Yeah, I don't think he's. I don't think he's factored into. He's like Matt Reeves said. He conceived of this whole thing as a trilogy of films, and I don't think the Victor character factored into his plans for part 2 and part 3. So, I think Victor is an original character created specifically for this show.
Oh, definitely.
As far as I know, there's not going to be a season 2 of this show before Batman Part 2. So.
No, and I think there's a report going out. I haven't read it, but apparently they want to expand this version of the Batman universe. Yeah. But what it's going to look like, we don't know. And even if the next show isn't the Penguin season 2, it doesn't mean that you can't convince Colin Farrell to show up at some point.
Yeah, I think last week's rumor about Zaslav wanting to push the Reeves universe into the DCU, maybe he's reconsidering, having seen how well the ratings and the reviews are for this. Like, maybe you could just let this be its own thing and let it be its own universe in and of itself.
Yeah, let it be its own thing. Let the Batman 2 come out whenever it's supposed to come out, and then let the Batman that's supposed to belong for the DCU version happen with the Brave and the Bold. When that'll start developing further, we don't know. Muschietti is working on it as we speak.
The Dead Man speculates that I see Victor as Jesse from Breaking Bad, but Victor dies.
So Victor will do what Jesse was supposed to do. As long as he doesn't get a spin-off movie that does nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said it. El Camino sucked.
I've been hearing a lot of people make that comparison about that.
Yeah, but Victor stutters too much. Victor stutters too much because you don't want to be like, yeah, bitch.
But I think Penguin and Victor are more entertaining, though.
They are. I'm not besmirching Breaking Bad. That series is fantastic. But if you were to compare the two, Victor and Oz are the wacky version of Jesse and Walt.
Eugene Bird thought that was funny when you did this.
Yes. And no, I mean, you could see it as a reference to Romulus, but no, that was not a reference to Romulus.
No. So yeah, that's the 3rd episode of The Penguin. Show's getting interesting. My big question, of course, is when she says she's not the Hangman, don't believe everything you read. It's like, well, if she's literally not the Hangman, then why hasn't she been trying to correct people about that? Yeah. Because she seems like she's a take no bullshit type of person. Mm-hmm. But and she knows everybody thinks she's crazy, but it's like if the family betrayed her, like she says, "Oh, Penguin, you betrayed me," and blah blah blah. I mean, she seems like somebody who would just call him out. Like when she was at Alberto's like funeral reception and everybody's looking at her sideways just for walking in the room, I would have pictured she would have had the girth to like say something and be like,
Question.
Yeah.
Did they, and correct me if I probably forgot because I must have heard of it, but I don't know if I heard it correctly. Is there going to be a flashback with Falcone, Carmine? Yes. Okay.
Because they cast Mark Strong to play because John Turturro had a scheduling conflict.
Gotcha. Could it be possible that flashback episode is going to be the one that explores what happened to Sophia?
Yes.
Could it also be like a whole episode being flashback with Carmine, Penguin, Sophia, and then Sophia at Arkham?
Maybe with her at Arkham. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, we've been. Why not? Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if Barry Keoghan shows up at some point and starts poking in her cell.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if that's the case? It's like, oh, the inmates really are running the asylum. Now we're really connecting that pre-credit scene.
Mm.
Oh, sweet Jesus. Well, I mean, they did have to release her because of overpopulation and all that stuff, right? Was it overpopulation or was it because of the impact that they had to release some people?
I don't think they specified actually.
Okay, because I know they released her for some reason, but I don't know if it was because there was the talking heads mentioned something about people being released, and Sophia was then alluded to be one of those, but I
Yeah,
might be remembering it.
yeah. And if you scan the Riddler goons QR code from the first or second episode, it took you back to the Riddler's chat room where they're complaining that they're releasing these corrupt people because they're powerful and that kind of thing.
Okay, gotcha. All right, yeah. I also wanted to mention a couple of things that I found interesting. When you're seeing what happened to Victor's family after the explosion, it does give a new perspective to the effect that Batman has on Gotham. Like in comics, for the most part, Batman does what he can to keep the city safe, to fight corruption, and to fight the crazies. But when he meets someone who wants to match him move for move and it becomes like a grand scale, a lot of people get hurt. And while Batman is there to save the day at the end of the day, he's not there to save the people who were affected in the first place. So, on the one hand, he is a force for good, but on the other hand, a lot of people unfortunately suffer in the process.
Yeah.
So it's good to bring that up, not because I have anything against the Batman or what he stands for. It's just that it makes sense to portray the good and the bad of his war on crime, basically.
Right.
I remember during the post Rebirth era, after the Jeff Johns Doomsday Clock comic book was coming to a close, and Pete Tomasi and Doug Mankey were coming back to Detective Comics, there was a prelude where Batman is in the Batcave with Damian, and he's showing him this hologram of a lot of people that he saved, and then a lot of people that he didn't save. And then he's making a point that every year the number of people that he couldn't save keeps going down. And the point of that scene in the comic is I will continue my mission to save Gotham until the number reaches zero. So that's his main goal now, to make sure that nobody else in Gotham has to suffer the way he did when his parents were killed in Crime Alley, and that he can finally put the Cowl to rest. But comics have been around for so long that that number is going to take a long time to hit zero. And I lost Kat completely. She froze, people. She froze. I hope I'm not alone, people. Are you there? Please say something. I can't see the chat. I have no control of the con. Please don't leave me. Okay. Well, people, I guess until Kat decides to unfreeze and join us back, I'll just continue entertaining you somehow, some way. Did you know that the drug Bliss was introduced back in 2010? Oh, I guess I am the only one here. Oh, joy. I have no idea what to do now. I am embarrassed. I've never been in this situation. Oh my God, Kat, she's back. You scared me there. I was about to entertain our guest by myself.
Mm.
I was sputtering out of control. What do the comments say?
Eugene says, it's not his fault that they die, though, I believe, any more than those that died in World War II to save the world from the Axis powers.
No, it's true. It's not his fault, but the people won't see it that way, will they?
Mm. The Dead Man says, I think that the point of the rooftop scene in the Batman was to show that he was helping the rescuers, was to show that he recognized that he was part of the problem.
Yes, but I think this flashback kind of drove home that, for every action, there's a reaction.
Mm.
Because, yeah, the Riddler was the one who ignited the bombs, but again, it's kind of like that scene in Avengers Age of Ultron where Vision says that, as powerful as we are, who's to say that no one is going to be there to match us?
Mm.
So again, the crime lords are leaving and the crazies are taking over. It's going to be a new Gotham by the end of the show.
Fair enough, says the dead man.
Of course.
Oh, and Eugene Bird, thank you so much for the super sticker. $9.99. Thank you.
Now we can give that to Scott so he can upgrade the software. Pretty soon we'll be having our own QR codes here, people.
Yes, for sure we will.
It'll take you to the gulp.
Well, I think that's it. Let's got anything else to add?
I do not. I was going to start talking about the other fun facts of the Bliss drug before you came.
Oh, yeah, by all means, please do.
Well, like I was saying, it was created back in 2010 in the Teen Titans books at the time, and it also included Roy Harper and the Brotherhood of Evil. Roy Harper, famously a drug addict in the comics back in the day when they wanted to kind of like bring awareness to addiction and drugs, and they used one of their prominent sidekick heroes, Roy Harper being the sidekick to Green Arrow, Oliver Queen. And I remember, right now, talking about drugs and addiction really isn't that out of the norm or crazy to even suggest. But back during the comics code and everything, just to see Roy Harper pretty much just having his arm wrapped with a belt and injecting himself and being caught by Oliver that he has an addiction, back then that was a big deal. So the fact that they kind of like made a reference to Roy Harper being a subject to the Bliss drug is a statement that he still had to go through a monumental suffering for him to, make a big change. Sometimes it's one of those things that I like about comics. Yeah, they are escapism, but do not misinterpret escapism for lack of great storytelling.
Yes.
Because comic books can tell as good a story as an Eisner Award-winning book, as a New York Times bestseller. Comics, yeah, they have pictures. We know they have pictures, but I dare you to pull out a book off the top of your head that's as good, if not better. Comics can be great if you allow them to.
Yes, for sure.
And hey, we got a TV show because comics are great.
Yes.
That's all from me, El Pingüino on the iceberg, somehow still floating in the Caribbean. Don't ask me how.
Yes. Well, I want to thank the chat, Eugene Bird and Affinity, the Dead Man, Lemon Pie, DJ Play Nice. Thanks for coming, and and Daniel's Hot Topics. Thank you for showing up as well. It's been a fun review. We're going to keep this series going. Not sure when we'll do the next one. Maybe on Monday or maybe next Wednesday. We'll find out.
As long as it's not a Thursday, I will be there.
Absolutely. So until next time, I'm Kat with my top hat and El Pingüino.
What?
Oh, great. I have to do this again. I got to set the outro video. You think it would be already loaded.
You would think, but no expense.
Never spared any expense.